Do you remember me, human? Years ago, I saved the alien queen in battle. HFY, the war between humanity and the alien species had dragged on for years. The stakes were high, and the outcome uncertain. Lieutenant Alex Grant had always believed in the cause, but in the deepest corners of his mind, a small part of him wondered if it was worth it. He had seen too much destruction, too many good men and women lost in battles that seemed endless. But the mission was clear, and that clarity was what had kept him going. Alex's team, a group of specially trained soldiers, had been sent to a remote world on the outskirts of alien-controlled territory. The mission was simple: destroy the enemy's command center, cripple their supply lines, and take out any significant threats before the rest of the fleet could arrive. It was a routine mission for the seasoned soldiers of the human military. Yet nothing about this operation would turn out to be routine. They had landed under the cover of darkness, slipping past the enemy's sensors undetected. As they moved closer to their target, the tension in the air was palpable. The world they had landed on was strange, a twisted, barren landscape of jagged rocks and ancient ruins. The wind howled through the hollow caverns, carrying the eerie sound of alien creatures in the distance. But there was no time to waste. The mission was critical. They pushed forward, determined to complete it. Alex was leading the team, his senses sharp and alert. They had made it halfway to the enemy's stronghold when disaster struck. A trap. The first explosion was deafening, ripping through the rocky terrain like a thunderclap. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and Alex felt his heart race as a wave of dust and debris hit him. His helmet's heads-up display flickered, and his training kicked in immediately. His team scrambled to find cover, but before they could regroup, another explosion tore through the ground beneath them, sending them scattering in different directions. In the chaos, Alex lost sight of his team. The radio crackled with static, and he could only make out the faint sound of their voices, distorted by the interference. He was alone, isolated in the heart of enemy territory. His mission was to take out the command center, but now his only priority was survival. He moved cautiously, keeping to the shadows and relying on his training. The enemy had clearly anticipated a human strike, and they were prepared for it. The ground trembled beneath him again, but this time, Alex knew the enemy wasn't just waiting, they were hunting. It wasn't long before he heard them, the Sirash. The Sirash were a ruthless species. With their dark, armored exoskeletons and sharp, predatory features, they struck fear into anyone who faced them in battle. They were known for their ferocity and their ability to strike with surgical precision. But what Alex didn't expect was the presence of their queen, the figure who commanded their legions. As the shadows closed in, Alex spotted her, the Sirash queen. She stood at the edge of a cliff, silhouetted against the dark sky. Her armor gleamed with an eerie metallic shine, and her eyes glowed with a dangerous light. She was not alone. A small group of her warriors flanked her, their movements sharp and precise. Alex's heart raced as he crouched behind a rock, trying to keep his breathing steady. He had heard the stories, of course, who hadn't? The Sirash queen was infamous for her tactical brilliance and her ruthlessness in battle. No one survived an encounter with her. But Alex had no choice. If he wanted to survive, he would have to face her, and if he wanted to complete the mission, he had to find a way to neutralize her forces. He couldn't just wait for backup. The stakes were too high. As he studied her movements, Alex noticed something strange. Despite the danger, despite the bloodthirsty warriors surrounding her, there was a look in her eyes, a flicker of something else. It wasn't fear or anger. It was something more complex, something almost human. The ground trembled again, but this time it wasn't from explosions. It was from the arrival of another enemy faction, a rival species that had no love for the Sirash. They had come for the queen. In that instant, Alex knew what he had to do. Without thinking, he darted from his hiding spot, sprinting toward the queen. His mind screamed at him to turn back to get away. But there was no time. He reached her just as the rival alien force launched their assault. A barrage of laser fire rained down on the Sirash, cutting through their ranks with ruthless efficiency. The queen, surprised by his sudden appearance, turned her glowing eyes toward him. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Alex didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he shoved her out of the line of fire, knocking her to the ground. She hissed in pain as she tried to regain her footing, but Alex didn't give her a chance. He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her toward a nearby cave that could provide some cover. The Queen's warriors were falling one by one, outgunned and outnumbered. The rival alien force was relentless, and Alex knew they wouldn't stop until they had the Queen in their grasp. But Alex couldn't let that happen, not after what he had just witnessed. There was something in her, something that told him she wasn't just another ruthless leader. The Queen's eyes burned with intensity as they reached the safety of the cave. She hissed, struggling to break free of his grasp, but Alex held her firmly. Her breathing was rapid, her pulse racing beneath the armor. You saved me." Her voice was low, filled with confusion. Her eyes never left him, as though she were trying to read him, to understand why he had done it. "I couldn't let them kill you," Alex replied, his voice steady despite the situation. "You're not the enemy I was sent to stop. You're not my enemy." The Queen's gaze softened for a moment. Then she pulled herself free from his grip, her movements swift and precise. For a moment, Alex thought she might attack him, but instead she backed away, her sharp gaze still fixed on him. "You've made a grave mistake, human," she said, her voice almost a whisper, yet filled with a dangerous edge. "I am your enemy, and one day you will realize that." Alex stood his ground despite the weight of her words. "I'm not here to fight you, I'm here to survive." The Queen studied him for a long moment, her eyes flicking toward the battle outside. Alex knew she was assessing the situation, weighing her options. Finally, she spoke again. "You've saved me today, and I will not forget it. But do not think this will change the course of our war. We are enemies, human, always." Alex nodded. "I know, but sometimes survival means making difficult choices. I'm not here to start a war. I'm just trying to get out alive." With a hiss, the Queen turned, signaling her remaining warriors to follow her. She didn't look back, and Alex didn't chase her. He knew that they were now connected, however briefly, by this strange, unforeseen act. What it would mean in the future, he didn't know. But one thing was certain, the war had just become more complicated. As Alex made his way back to the extraction point, his mind raced. He had done the unthinkable. He had saved the life of an alien queen, an enemy queen. And yet, despite the danger, he couldn't shake the feeling that his actions had been right. What did it mean? He didn't know. But as he waited for his team to regroup, he couldn't help but wonder, had he truly just made an ally? Or had he set himself on a path that would lead to even greater conflict? He had no answers. Not yet. Years passed since that fateful day on the alien world. The war between humanity and the Sirash, as well as their allies, continued to rage. But for Alex Grant, the battlefields had become a distant memory. After the strange encounter with the Sirash Queen, he had returned to Earth and quietly transitioned into civilian life. His service was honored with medals, but those honors felt empty to him. He couldn't forget the Queen, her eyes, her words, the way she seemed to understand something about him that no one else did. Alex had never spoken of the encounter to anyone, not even his closest friends or military comrades. It had been a strange, surreal moment, and he didn't quite understand it himself. The Queen had been an enemy, a force to be destroyed. Yet when the situation had presented itself, he had chosen to save her. Why? What had driven him to make such an unexpected choice? He had no answers, so Alex went back to a quieter life. He worked as a private contractor, doing security work for various companies and government agencies. He kept his head down, staying out of the public eye. After all, the galaxy was still at war, and he was no longer a soldier. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man trying to make his way in a broken world, but there were days when the past came crashing back. The nightmares, the memories, the battlefields. Sometimes in the dead of night, he'd wake up in a cold sweat, hearing the sound of explosions or the screams of his fallen comrades. It haunted him, even in the quiet moments. On one of these restless nights, Alex sat on the balcony of his small apartment, staring up at the stars. The city below him was alive with the hum of traffic and the glow of neon lights, but Alex's mind was far away. His thoughts drifted to the Queen, to the decision he had made. He wondered what had happened to her after he left. Had she survived the ambush? Had she remembered him? Or had he simply become another human in the vast sea of faces that passed through her life? As if on cue, his communicator buzzed. It was a secure message, one he rarely received. He hadn't been in contact with any of his old military contacts for years, so this was unusual. With a sigh, he tapped the screen, opening the message. The words were brief and cryptic. "We need your help. Urgent. Location, Sirash territory. Meet at coordinates." Alex's heart skipped a beat. Sirash territory, the place he had never wanted to return to. He had made a promise to himself to leave that part of his life behind. But now, after receiving this message, his curiosity gnawed at him. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he sat back in his chair, staring at the coordinates. 1,000 questions swirled in his mind. What was going on? Why were they contacting him after all these years? And why now? The silence in his apartment was deafening. The weight of the decision pressed on him. He had tried to move on, but somehow the past always found a way to pull him back in. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex stood up, grabbed his jacket, and made his decision. He couldn't ignore this. Not now. He wasn't sure what awaited him, but deep down, he knew that this was connected to the Queen. It had to be. The journey to Sirash territory took several days. Alex traveled on a military-grade ship, one that was sleek and fast, designed for high-priority missions. The space around him was silent, the dark vacuum of space stretching out endlessly. There were no distractions, no noise. Just him and his thoughts. He replayed the events of years ago in his mind. The Queen, her strange reaction to him, the way she had looked at him as though she knew something he didn't. There had been no time to ask questions, no time to understand what had really happened. But now he had an opportunity to find out. He wasn't sure if he was prepared for what he might discover, but he couldn't turn back. The ship finally dropped out of warp, entering Sirash space. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he saw the vast expanse of alien territory stretching out before him. The planet he was heading to was a world at war, a world of constant battles, both in the skies and on the ground. The message had led him to a hidden base, deep in the heart of Sirash-controlled land. As the ship descended through the atmosphere, Alex could see the scorched earth below, remnants of a long, bloody conflict. The landscape was barren, filled with ruined cities and craters from centuries of warfare. He landed at an isolated outpost, where a small team of soldiers was waiting for him. As soon as Alex stepped off the ship, he was greeted by a familiar face. It was Captain Rika, one of his old contacts from his days in the military. She was a no-nonsense officer, someone who had survived the worst of the war with the Sirash. She had once been part of his team, back when they were all fighting together. "Alex, glad you could make it," Rika said, her voice cool but with a hint of relief. "We didn't know who else to contact. You're the best we've got for this kind of job." Alex gave her a nod, not saying anything at first. He didn't know what this was about, but he trusted Rika. She had always been straight with him. "Where are we headed?" he asked. "Follow me," she replied, leading him toward a small, armored vehicle. The ride was bumpy as they made their way through the desolate terrain. The air was thick with the smell of ash and burning metal. It was a far cry from the cities of Earth, and yet Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity in the chaos. As they neared their destination, Alex saw a large, fortified structure looming in the distance. It was a stronghold, a military base, but unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were reinforced with alien technology, and there were heavy security measures in place. This was no ordinary outpost. It was something far more important. When they arrived, Rika led him through a series of tight corridors, past armed guards and encrypted doors. Finally, they reached a secure chamber. Inside, there was a figure standing in the center, the one person Alex had never expected to see again, the Sirash Queen. She stood there regal and composed, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Her armored exoskeleton reflected the soft glow of the room, and her piercing gaze locked onto Alex as he entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was no need for words. They had both been through too much. Alex could see the weight of the years in her eyes, the strain of leadership and war. "I knew you would come," she said, her voice softer than he remembered, yet still carrying an air of authority. "You always did what was necessary, even when you didn't understand why." Alex stood still, uncertain of what to say. "I never expected to see you again," he admitted. She nodded as if that was the answer she had expected. "I didn't think I would see you either. But we have bigger problems now." The air in the room seemed to grow heavier as she spoke, and Alex knew this wasn't just a simple reunion. There was something much more dangerous at stake. "You were right to save me that day," the Queen continued. "I never forgot it. And now I need your help." Alex's mind raced. This wasn't what he had expected. He had thought this would be some mission or military operation, not a plea for assistance from the very alien Queen he had once saved. "What kind of help do you need?" Alex asked cautiously. The Queen's gaze hardened. A new threat is rising, a force more dangerous than any we've ever faced, the Zale. Her words sent a chill down Alex's spine. The Zale were a race of conquerors, ancient and ruthless. No one had heard much about them, but rumors had spread like wildfire. Some believed they were the original source of the galaxy's instability. "We must work together if we are to survive," the Queen said, her voice determined. "Will you help me?" Alex's heart pounded. The answer seemed obvious, but the weight of the decision was heavy. He had never been one for alliances, especially not with the enemy, but in this moment he realized that there was no other choice. "I'm in," he said quietly. "What do we need to do?" The Queen's eyes softened just for a moment. "Together we will face this threat. Together we will ensure that the galaxy survives." And with those words, Alex knew that his path had just become more complicated than ever before. The situation in Sirash territory had escalated faster than Alex could have anticipated. After his arrival at the fortified base, the Queen, whom he had once saved, had been blunt about the danger they now faced. The Zale, an ancient and terrifying race, were on the move, and their conquest was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Queen's words rang in Alex's mind as he walked through the sterile corridors of the base, the weight of their meaning pressing heavily on him. The Zale had been mere rumors until recently. Few had encountered them, and even fewer had survived to tell the tale. Their technology was far beyond anything the Sirash or humanity had developed, and their ruthless methods of conquest had made them feared across the galaxy. They did not negotiate. They did not make peace. They simply destroyed everything in their path, and their goal was clear: domination. The Queen had briefed Alex and the team of soldiers she had gathered. She had no intention of sitting back and waiting to be overrun. She was willing to work with humanity, something that still seemed strange to Alex, but the threat was too great to ignore. The human forces had long been fighting the Sirash, but now the stakes were higher than either side had ever imagined. "We don't have the luxury of time," the Queen had said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "The Zale are coming for us, and they won't stop until we're gone. This isn't just about Sirash or humanity anymore. This is about survival." Alex had agreed to help her, but even as the words left his mouth, he couldn't shake the feeling that his decision had just thrown him into a situation far more complicated than he could handle. He had always been a soldier, but now he was part of something bigger, an alliance he never expected. Over the next few days, Alex trained with the Queen's warriors, learning their combat techniques and studying their tactics. The Sirash were fierce fighters, and their strength and endurance were legendary. Their warriors were battle-hardened and relentless, yet there was a calmness to their approach that Alex had not expected. They fought with precision, each movement deliberate and controlled. But despite the Queen's strength and her people's discipline, there was a sense of unease in the air. The Zale were coming, and everyone knew it. The Queen seemed to be handling it with her usual poise, but Alex could see the toll it was taking on her. The once imposing leader now looked weary, her eyes betraying the burden of leadership. She was a queen, but even queens had their breaking points. One evening, after a long day of training and strategizing, Alex found himself alone in the base's observation room, staring out at the distant horizon. The planet's surface was a wasteland, scarred by centuries of warfare. The air was thick with the smell of ash and the remnants of old battles. It was a fitting landscape for the turmoil that awaited them. He thought back to that moment years ago when he had saved the Queen's life. It had been an instinct, a choice made in the heat of battle without thinking of the consequences. But now, in this quiet moment, Alex realized that his decision had set him on a path he could not turn away from. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something greater, the future of the galaxy. Footsteps behind him broke his reverie, and he turned to see the Queen entering the room. She moved with her usual grace, her armor gleaming in the soft light of the setting sun. She paused next to him, gazing out at the barren landscape as well. "Do you ever wonder if we can win?" Alex asked, his voice low. The Queen's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. For a long moment she said nothing, and Alex thought she might not answer at all. But then finally she spoke. "I used to believe that war was simple," she said softly. "You fight, you conquer, you rule. But over the years I've learned that nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Every choice we make has consequences. And now every decision is more important than ever. The Zale are unlike any enemy we've ever faced. Alex nodded. I've heard the stories, but I never thought they were true. Now it feels like they're coming for us all. They are, she replied, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of fear. They have no mercy. They do not negotiate. They do not spare the weak. They will come for us, and if we do not stand together, we will fall. Alex turned to face her, studying her expression. The Queen's usual air of confidence had been replaced with something else, something that resembled doubt. It was subtle, but it was there. She was afraid. And for the first time, Alex realized that the Queen, the mighty leader of the Sirash, was human after all. She was vulnerable, just like anyone else. We'll stand together, Alex said, his voice firm. We'll fight. We'll find a way. The Queen turned to him, her piercing eyes locking onto his. There was something in her gaze, a flicker of something he couldn't quite place. For a moment he thought she might say something else, but instead she simply nodded. Then we will fight, she said, her voice resolute once more, and we will win. The next few days were spent preparing for the Zale's inevitable arrival. The base was a hive of activity, with soldiers from both the Sirash and human forces working together. The alliance, though born of necessity, was beginning to show signs of unity. For the first time, Alex felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. He wasn't just a soldier on the front lines. He was part of a force that might actually stand a chance against the Zale. Alex spent his days training with the Sirash warriors, learning their advanced tactics and honing his combat skills. The Queen had insisted that every soldier, regardless of their background, be trained in the same way. They needed to be a cohesive unit, one that could fight together as if they were a single entity. It was a challenge, but Alex welcomed it. The more he trained, the more he realized how much he still had to learn. The Sirash were unlike any fighters he had ever encountered. Their discipline was unparalleled, their techniques deadly precise. But despite the rigorous training, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. The Zale were coming, and they were bringing a storm of destruction with them. Every day, the threat grew closer. Every day, the Queen seemed more and more distant, as though the weight of the situation was slowly crushing her. She had always been a powerful figure, but now she was struggling to keep it all together. One evening, after a long day of preparations, Alex found himself once again alone in the observation room, watching the stars. The war had taken its toll on everyone. He had seen it in the eyes of his fellow soldiers, in the exhaustion that marked their faces. But it was most evident in the Queen. The once mighty ruler seemed to be crumbling under the pressure. She entered the room quietly, as if unsure of what to say. Alex didn't turn to look at her. He didn't need to. He could feel her presence behind him. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. Alex took a deep breath before responding. "I don't know if anyone is ready for what's coming, but we'll do what we have to do." The Queen was silent for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with an emotion Alex had never expected from her. "I've spent my entire life preparing for battle. I've fought for my people, for my throne, but now I fight for something I never thought possible, a future where my people survive, where all of us survive." Alex turned to face her, surprised by the vulnerability in her words. The Queen, the alien leader he had once seen as a cold, unyielding force, was human after all. "We'll survive," Alex said, his voice firm. "Together we'll survive." She met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and something else, something he couldn't quite define. In that moment, Alex understood that their alliance was more than just strategic. It was personal. They were fighting for something more than just their own survival. They were fighting for the survival of everything they had ever known. The Queen gave him a small nod. "Then we fight, and we win." The days had turned into weeks. The constant preparations for battle wore on Alex's mind and body. He had never been one to complain, but even he could feel the weight of the coming war pressing down on him. Every soldier, every commander, and every leader knew that the Zale were close, and that their arrival would mark the beginning of an all-out war that would either break the galaxy or forge a new future for it. Alex had grown used to the endless drills, the long hours of strategy meetings, and the anxious faces of those around him. The tension in the base was palpable, as if everyone knew the day of reckoning was just around the corner. The Queen had kept her composure through it all, her presence steadying the warriors around her. But even Alex could see that the constant burden of leadership was taking its toll on her. She had been a symbol of strength, but in the quiet moments when the sun dipped below the horizon, she seemed almost fragile. There were no more questions from Alex about why he was still here, why he had agreed to join this fight. The reasons had become clear: survival, unity, and the belief that together they had a chance. The Zale might have the advantage in technology, but Alex had seen the way the Sirash fought. They were relentless, a force that could not be underestimated. The first signs of the Zale's approach came as a whisper in the wind. A series of strange energy readings were detected by their long-range sensors. The Queen, her warriors, and Alex himself had expected this. They knew the Zale had no interest in small, gradual invasions. When they came, they would strike with all their might, a thunderous assault that would leave nothing behind. Then, the message came. The Queen's voice rang out in the command center, her tone colder than usual but filled with a steely resolve. "The Zale are here," she said, her words echoing through the room. "Prepare for immediate deployment. We fight today or we die today." Alex felt a cold chill run through him. He had never been in a battle quite like the one he was about to face. The time for strategy and preparation was over. It was time to fight, to survive, or to fall. The base quickly sprang into action, the soldiers moving with precision. Even in the chaos, there was a sense of unity among them. The humans and the Sirash warriors, once enemies, now moved together as one. Alex could see it in their eyes. They were ready to face whatever the Zale could throw at them. They gathered their weapons, checked their equipment, and then moved out into the open, where the atmosphere was thick with the smell of ionized air. The planet's surface had been a battleground for decades, and now it would host one of the most critical fights in the galaxy's history. As Alex moved into position, he could see the Queen standing at the front of her forces, her sharp gaze scanning the horizon. She was unflinching, her expression hard, but there was a fire behind her eyes that burned brighter than anything Alex had ever seen. Despite the immense weight of her responsibilities, she was still the leader her people needed. "The Zale will come from the east," the Queen spoke, her voice carrying through the communication system. "They will bring everything they have. Our goal is simple: hold them off long enough for reinforcements to arrive. We do not have the luxury of time." Alex nodded, his grip tightening on his weapon. He knew this was no longer just about strategy. It was about fighting for their very existence. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the first signs of the Zale's approach became visible. A massive warship appeared on the horizon, its sleek, terrifying form cutting through the air with unnatural speed. The ship was followed by smaller craft, each one armed to the teeth, ready to wreak havoc on anything in their path. "We've never faced anything like this before," Alex said to Rika, his old comrade who had been with him from the beginning. She nodded grimly. "No one has," she replied, "but we have no choice but to fight." The Zale's warship hovered above the battlefield, and as it did, smaller vessels descended from it, releasing a flurry of troops that hit the ground like a wave crashing against the shore. The alien warriors were terrifying, their dark, jagged armor gleaming in the sunlight, their eyes glowing with an eerie, unnatural light. They were relentless without fear, and they moved with a precision that made them nearly impossible to track. The battle began almost instantly. Alex and his team were in the thick of it, fighting side by side with the Sirash warriors. The ground exploded around them as the Zale opened fire, their weapons emitting blasts of energy that tore through the terrain. Alex fired back, his aim true as he picked off enemy soldiers one by one. He could hear the screams of his comrades as they fought, as the sound of battle became a deafening roar. The Queen was at the front, leading her forces with unparalleled skill. She moved through the battlefield with the grace of a predator, cutting through the enemy lines as though they were nothing more than obstacles. Her warriors followed her every command, and Alex saw the way they fought with an intensity that matched her own. But as the battle raged on, it became clear that the Zale were not going to give up easily. Their forces seemed endless, and for every one of them that fell, two more took their place. Alex could feel the weight of the battle pressing down on him. Every movement felt like it could be his last. The air was thick with smoke and the stench of burning metal. His heart pounded in his chest as the fighting grew fiercer. In the chaos of battle, Alex lost sight of the Queen. He had been focused on the Zale's forces, keeping his attention on the enemy, but now his thoughts returned to her. He knew she had been fighting at the front lines, but he hadn't seen her for a while. Had she been injured? Was she still alive? His mind raced as he fought through the chaos, taking down enemy soldiers left and right. But even as he fought, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The queen had been everywhere at once, but now there was an eerie silence where she had once been. Then through the haze of smoke and fire, Alex saw her. She was standing in the midst of a group of Zale soldiers, her back to him, her movements slow and deliberate. Her eyes were focused on something in the distance, but there was no fear in them. She was poised, confident, and in control. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he rushed forward, cutting through the enemy lines to reach her. As he did, he saw the Zale soldiers closing in on her from every side. There were too many of them, too many to count. But the queen was unfazed. She moved like a blur, cutting through the enemy ranks with a precision that left Alex in awe. Her sword flashed, her movements fluid and graceful, each strike bringing down one of the enemy. "Get down!" Alex shouted as he reached her, pulling her to the ground just as a blast of energy flew overhead. The queen's eyes met his, a brief moment of surprise flashing in them before she regained her composure. "I don't need saving," she said, her voice as calm as ever, though Alex could hear the underlying tension. "But I appreciate the gesture." "We need to fall back," Alex said urgently, his eyes scanning the battlefield. "The reinforcements aren't going to make it in time. We're losing ground." The queen paused for a moment, her sharp eyes scanning the scene around them. She looked out at the battlefield, then back at Alex. "I won't retreat," she said firmly. "Not until we've done what we came here to do." Alex knew there was no convincing her. The queen had made her decision, and now he had to respect it. He followed her lead, fighting alongside her as they pushed forward, cutting down enemy after enemy. The Zale were relentless, but they were beginning to slow, their forces starting to thin as their numbers dwindled. For a brief moment, it seemed like they might actually have a chance. But then, the ground shook once more. The sky was filled with explosions, and a massive force of Zale reinforcements arrived. The battle was about to take a turn for the worse. "We have to go now," Alex shouted, grabbing the queen's arm and pulling her back. The battle was lost. The Zale had too many soldiers, and their firepower was overwhelming, but the queen resisted, shaking off his grip. "I will not retreat," she said, her voice hard as steel. This fight is not over yet. The battle raged on for what felt like an eternity. The once quiet and barren landscape had become a war zone, the ground torn apart by explosions, and the sky darkened by the billowing smoke. Alex's muscles burned with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. The queen, despite the chaos and the overwhelming enemy forces, was still fighting with an intensity that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. She had no intention of retreating, and neither would he. Alex had fought in countless battles, but nothing like this. The Zale were relentless, and their superior firepower was evident in every attack. For every enemy they took down, two more took their place. It felt like they were fighting an endless tide, and the more they fought, the more desperate their situation became. The ground beneath them trembled with each explosion, and the air was thick with the stench of burnt metal and smoke. Despite the odds, Alex couldn't bring himself to back down. He had seen enough in his life to know that retreat was never the answer. The queen had been fighting for her people for centuries, and now she was fighting for all of them, for humanity, for the Sirash, and for the future of the galaxy. If they lost today, everything would be lost. "We need to push them back," Alex said through gritted teeth, as he fired another round into a group of advancing Zale soldiers. "We will," the queen replied, her voice unwavering as she swung her sword, cutting down an enemy soldier with a single blow. "We are not giving up." Her determination fueled him, and together they fought side by side. A seamless partnership formed from their shared struggle. But as the battle wore on, Alex began to feel the weight of their situation. The Zale forces were not only overwhelming in number, but also far more advanced in technology. The human and Sirash forces were holding their own, but it was only a matter of time before the tide shifted against them. Suddenly, the air around them began to crackle with energy. Alex looked up, his eyes scanning the battlefield, trying to determine the source of the disturbance. He felt a sudden shift in the air, a strange, unnatural feeling that he couldn't place. The ground beneath their feet began to shake again, but this time it was different. The vibrations were more intense, and the sounds of the battle seemed to fade away, replaced by a low, ominous hum. The queen's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the battlefield. "They're preparing something," she said quietly. "Something bigger." Before Alex could respond, a massive explosion tore through the ground in front of them. The force of the blast sent them both flying, and Alex's vision blurred as he hit the ground. He struggled to regain his bearings, pushing himself up on one arm as the world around him spun. His head throbbed and his ears rang from the explosion. For a moment, everything was disorienting, and it felt like the world was collapsing around him. When the dizziness cleared, Alex looked around. He saw that the battlefield had changed in an instant. The Zale had activated something, a massive energy weapon that was now leveling entire sections of the terrain. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a force of destruction unlike anything Alex had ever seen. The ground cracked open, and huge fissures appeared, swallowing up soldiers and equipment alike. The sky above them turned a sickly shade of red as the energy weapon charged again. "We need to stop that thing," Alex shouted, barely able to hear his own voice over the cacophony of the battle. The Queen didn't hesitate. She was already on the move, darting toward the energy weapon with incredible speed. Her warriors followed, forming a protective barrier around her. But Alex knew that even with all their power, they were no match for this new weapon. The Zale had just tipped the scales in their favor, and if they didn't act fast, they would be wiped out. Alex followed the Queen, pushing through the chaos as fast as he could. He could feel the heat of the energy weapon as it pulsed, charging for another devastating blast. He knew that time was running out. "Move!" he shouted to the nearby soldiers, urging them to follow him. "We have to destroy it." The Queen, ahead of him, was already working her way toward the heart of the Zale forces, cutting through their lines with her sword. Her movements were flawless, but Alex could see the strain in her eyes. She was tired, just like everyone else. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for everything they had ever known. As Alex pushed forward, he could see the energy weapon's core in the distance, pulsing with power. It was housed in a massive, heavily fortified structure surrounded by Zale troops. They were the last line of defense before the weapon could be fully activated. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he surveyed the scene. He knew what had to be done, but the risk was immense. They were outnumbered, and the weapon's power was nearly unstoppable. "We can do this," Alex said, trying to rally his troops. "We just need to get to the core." The Queen gave him a single, determined nod. "Let's finish this." Together, they surged forward, their weapons blazing. The Queen was at the front, cutting down any Zale soldiers that dared to stand in her way. Her warriors fought with equal ferocity, while Alex and his team picked off the remaining enemies as they moved. The closer they got to the core, the more intense the fighting became. The Zale were desperate to protect their weapon, and they were willing to sacrifice everything to do so. As they reached the outer perimeter of the structure, Alex's heart raced. The energy weapon was now fully charged, its power crackling in the air. The Zale were preparing for another devastating strike. He could feel the ground shake beneath his feet, and he knew that if they didn't destroy it now, they would lose everything. The Queen raised her sword high, rallying her warriors for the final push. "We fight together," she shouted, her voice filled with resolve. "For our people, for the galaxy." With that, they charged. The battle raged around them as they fought their way into the heart of the Zale stronghold. Alex's mind was focused solely on the weapon in front of him. He could feel the energy building, the immense power threatening to tear everything apart. He had to destroy it, or they would all be lost. The Queen and her warriors were at the heart of the Zale defense, slashing through any resistance. Alex moved forward, his weapon aimed at the core. He could see the energy source now, a massive crystal pulsing with light. It was the heart of the weapon. He had to get close, but the Zale were not going to make it easy. They fought with everything they had, but Alex pushed through, his resolve unshakable. Finally, he reached the core. The energy was intense, almost overwhelming, but he didn't hesitate. He planted a charge at the base of the crystal, securing it in place. As he did, the ground shook violently, and the energy weapon began to hum, preparing for its next devastating strike. "It's done," Alex shouted to the Queen. She nodded, her face set in determination. "Get back now." Alex didn't need any more encouragement. He turned and sprinted away, running as fast as he could to escape the blast radius. Behind him, the Queen and her warriors followed, covering his retreat as they ran. As they reached the edge of the battlefield, the charge detonated. The explosion was deafening, a massive wave of energy that tore through the ground, sending shockwaves rippling through the battlefield. The energy weapon was destroyed, and with it, the Zale's advantage. The blast sent Alex and the Queen sprawling to the ground, but they managed to shield themselves from the worst of the impact. When the dust finally settled, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The Zale forces were in disarray, their weapon destroyed, their morale shattered. The Queen, breathing heavily but unbroken, rose to her feet, looking around at the wreckage. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of exhaustion and relief. Alex nodded, though he knew this battle was far from over. But for now, they had won. They had fought together against all odds, and they had triumphed. There would be more battles ahead, but for the first time in a long while, Alex felt a sense of hope. They might have just won the war. The Queen turned to him, her piercing eyes locking with his. "You were right. Sometimes survival means making difficult choices, but today we chose to fight." Alex gave a weary smile. "And today we won." Together they stood on the battlefield, survivors of a war that had tested them to their limits. But the fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The Zale were still out there, and they would return. But now, Alex knew one thing for sure: no matter what happened next, they would face it together.